how did Uber come to be is because they looked at the traditional taxi process and they eliminated certain parts, rearranged the process, and they became huge.
You need to design for the 80%. For the 80% of the population who's going to use your basic features. I think a good example is Google Maps. 80% of the people just use it to, get directions to go somewhere.
Welcome to another episode of Our Tech Chronicles. This is our 37th episode. The topic today is Oops, We Forgot the User, Lessons in Human-Centered Design, where we'll be going through what is a bad design, and we've all seen it. We'll go through some of them, and then we'll go into stories around design choices, good and bad, we've made. And then we'll go through some processes that works, some principles we could all share to improve our design thinking. And then finally, some modern pitfalls that we typically fall into when it comes to designing new systems, and end with that.
Sounds good, Sean. So, before we get started, right, I want to ask you guys a question. If you could redesign one everyday object, anything from maybe your fridge, your microwave, to be more human-centered, what would it be?
It would be the regular ironing device. I wish it is wireless so it doesn't get tangled with the clothes all the time.
That's a good one. Yeah, I like that. So you do a lot of ironing.
I do a lot of ironing, yes.
I was like, what's that?
I was thinking, in the car when we drive, you have the dashboard, right, with all these knobs for like the AC and whatnot. Technically, what happens is you have to divert your attention a little bit to look at that to change the temperature, for example, right? Or even simple. Now we have CarPlay and Android Play. Still, you have to look and do something. It would be nice if maybe they change that to show it in like a heads-up display while you're looking at the road, and you can make those changes without taking your eyes off the road. Just an idea. Why not?
Yeah.
It's a high-tech one.
Some cars do have it a little bit, right? Not everything though. I think it's called the hologram or something. But yeah, that's good.
I could circle back with my thought because it just occurred to me. Back in the day, our great grandfathers probably used a wireless iron because they put coal.
Full circle.
Yeah, full circle.
So first topic is, what's a bad design?
Starting from everyday items like door that has a pull, but it's supposed to be push. And there are some natural human way of designing, like if you see a plate on the door that naturally makes people push, there. And there are things like the idea of Uber, right? How did Uber come to be is because they looked at the traditional taxi process and they eliminated certain parts, rearranged the process, and they became huge. And one other thing is like when you think about Google, right? How did they become the giant today? All they did was just a single input because they identified what the user actually wants to do, just search something. But then there are some bad examples. Do you remember Windows ME? In Windows ME, they wanted to simplify everything for the tablet and the computer, and they made all of it look like tiles. That sucked big time.
That's true. I'm just thinking about other bad designs that we probably still use. Something I think about is the remote, right? Old school remotes, they have all these buttons, the numbers and everything. And I don't think I ever pressed those buttons. We only press maybe the channel up, channel down, or maybe the volume. But yet they still ship these things with all these buttons. To be fair, when the Apple remote first shipped, I was like, what is this? Right? Where is all the buttons? Like, can I even use this? But it's actually simple, right? It actually works. So
Yeah, as you were talking about this remote, I remembered the first iPhone launch, how Steve Jobs introduced the phone, right? Where like you have like used to have this massive keyboard on the phone. So whether you use it or not, like it's always there, right?
Yeah.
How do you make it disappear and like, bring it back only when you need to use it? Yeah, even like I don't know if you guys have used like the Apple TV remote on the phone.
Yes.
Like very similar to like the actual remote, right? Like
I remember back in the day you had the BlackBerry, right? We used to always tease you about that.
That's the other thing, right? Sometimes the design choices will drive users towards. I never thought this would be easy once I get used to it. Like I also thought like the buttons on the BlackBerry was more ergonomic than the iPhone. But then eventually you realize once you move to iPhone, you don't need physical buttons. So,
Physical, yeah.
but Apple made few mistakes too, like the butterfly keyboard on MacBooks. When they released that, they wanted to make it shorter so that it's flat, but then it flopped. So they had to bring back the traveling keys. So it's a journey.
It's a journey, exactly.
Yeah.
It's a journey. Any personal stories you want to share where maybe we've designed things where we think is the right solution? We haven't really checked with the humans.
I can say I'm guilty of probably most of the programmers or developers in IT field is that we always think about solution, right? First. So my first adventure was building my first app called Spare Gigs. It's gone now, where I kind of put all the features in there, like through the kitchen sink at it. Like there is a map component, search and all that. But ultimately, it didn't work out because it became so complex to the user. So I should have started with the user and kind of make it simpler, and then later add capabilities in a less intrusive way. So that was a good lesson learned.
I can share a story too. Very recently, in fact, maybe about a year ago, we were building this internal tool that was providing certain actions for service owners, right? Thousands of service owners. And we thought we knew exactly, we are service owners too. We thought we knew exactly what service owners wanted and presented this very fancy interface with actions grouped by, what hierarchy they were supposed to be grouped by, let's say, right? And when we presented that, oh my gosh, we got so many like Slack messages saying, okay, how do I use this? Why is this on a flat list? And we were used to think, what's wrong with these people? Who wants a flat list? This is nicely organized, right? But turns out they didn't care. They just wanted a list of actions that they had to do and be done with it. They were not going to look at this. It was just like a one off thing to look at, check it off, and move on. And we just made it like we added too many clicks to get to these different actions, which is hidden by these categories and whatnot, not needed at all. And it took us a while to like really understand all these Slack messages that we got and realize, hey, this is not working, right? A lot of the same messages, and then we managed to change it, and then only we started actually up with internal tool. If it's external, it's very different. But internal tool, we actually started then doing A/B testing and prototyping quickly and getting feedback saying, is this good for the people who complained? And then we released it. So we should have followed the proper principles that everyone else does, to be honest.
Yeah. Yeah, I have seen this handled in three different buckets, right? So the one of the buckets being like user-centered design. I think we'll talk more about like what it really means like next. But like the other two buckets I've seen is that Roshan, it follows along like what you said. It is like a very biased approach based on either someone's or like some group's opinion. So more like an inside out view and not like an outside in view, right? Or the third bucket I've seen, I'm actually relatively going through this like with with a client right now, that it becomes like a more technology driven design, right? So, and we have seen this as a bad practice even in software development in general, right? You are taking into account like the current technology stack and trying to retrofit like your experience to fit into that, right? So like kind of innovation gets thrown out the window when you do that. And I have seen that like quite a lot happening, because like the natural instinct is like, oh, like we already have these limitations, how do we make it work, right?
Yeah.
Because if you actually kind of go back to the drawing board, you might come up with like a better idea, and still like leverage like the existing tool set like to get that done. So yeah, I've seen it kind of like falling within like those three categories.
And that's spot on, Yuresh. I agree with you completely. And so maybe this is a good segue to move into the next step, which is okay, how do we prevent ourselves from falling into these three types of categories, right? Are there techniques, frameworks we can use upfront to prevent this?
Yeah, in my current company, we use a user-centric design and development, which is a flavor of the known double diamond approach. Double diamond is like you have two diamonds. One is a problem space, and then you have a solution phase. And they are diamond shaped because you basically diverge initially, like you identify all sorts of problem, and then you converge. You basically narrow down the key problems. And then you go into solution phase. Again, you diverge with great ideas, and then you pick the best ideas when you converge. And then some companies actually have third diamond, that is more viability, like how do we monetize it and make it a different pricing strategy and then narrow down. So it worked for us because it truly starts with empathize, where we need to understand what the problem is, because sometimes the problem is not the problem we wanted to solve. For example, hypothetically, let's say people are complaining the trains are slow. This is not something I came up with, I looked it up. So trains are slow, but what would the company would do? Do they have to put millions to make trains faster? But what they found out was when they reframe the problem, it is waiting needs to be more tolerable. So what they did was they started putting a countdown clock to show when the train is going to be arriving. And then they tried to put more other things that users can focus while they're waiting. So that paid the same dividend or even more than investing on faster trains. So that
Anticipation, right? Yeah.
Exactly. Anticipation. Yeah. So that leads into some of the principles. I don't know if you guys know about Don Norman. He's part of IDEO. IDEO is considered the best design thinking company. So he actually founded it. He laid out like 4 or 5 different principles that we need to think about. First is visibility. It's like users always want to know what's happening. Like, for example, in Gmail, when you're writing a message, after writing a message, the send button glows, saying that, okay, this is what you should be doing next. So something to lead the user to do the next step. And then the second one is feedback. This is what I lacked in first app I built, is that when they commit something, they need to see a progress, right? Something's happening behind the scene. If it's went silent, it's like mystery. Did it take my information I put in? So that's the feedback part. And then comes mapping, which is where most of our tech savvy solutions fail, is that they don't know if I make this action or what keys to use to make something happen. Like an ATM machine, if you have too many buttons, the users get confused. So there should be a clear indication. If I press this button, that's what's going to happen on the screen. So that's the mapping, and there are different lenses to look at.
Yeah, I think like if you go to like the basics of like the user-centric design, you definitely have to follow those principles, but like there's also like a process like to follow, right? Like in order to like kind of create that journey. So one is that it has to be like an iterative thing, right? You have to kind of do something, try it out, get some feedback. So, and this feedback is slightly different from what the feedback that Sean was talking about. Like, so the one Sean was talking about is more like the user takes an action, like, and they see something happening. The feedback I'm referring to is like part of like the designing phase that you're iteratively kind of getting like user feedback, whether this is good or bad, right? And this kind of goes to some companies follow like this in different stages. So if you are using some kind of like a design tool like Figma, like you are iteratively releasing like different versions, and depending on who you want to get the feedback from. So either some companies even follow like they select like their premium clients as a test group, like a beta test. In our previous episode, Chamen was talking about this, right? Like they when they were launching like their digital new platform, they actually launched it to like their premium customers, or you can even use like an internal group within your organization. So that iterative process is very important, so you are kind of like course correcting along the way. And also like once you go live, like people do it, even like if you're typically talking about like an app, or like even like a website, you do like a lot of A/B testing, right? You pick like one feature, like maybe like your homepage, like you change your hero image or something, and see like this versus that, like what gets more attention. So those review feedbacks are like very important, like to because you're actually getting the real feedback from the potential users, right? Like, so and we can go to like some other techniques that you use and some of the tools, like we can talk about like Figma a little bit, like how well you can use those types of tools. And also the last thing I want to kind of cover is that you have to kind of recognize your types of users, right? Like, so you have when you launch again, like I kind of keep going back to like the app or like a more like a web experience, online experience type of a thing. You have different types of users using the same platform. Sean, like you were talking about Uber earlier, right? So most of the time, what we get to see is like the rider side, but there's like a whole driver side of like that app, right? Which has like a set of what we call features that we don't get to see, right? But it's part of like the same app, right? And I think we have seen this in like other popular apps, like you take Airbnb, right? If you're hosting, like you kind of switch like that mode. It's the same platform, but it kind of gives like a different perspective. So there are like all these different concepts of and it is called like a user persona. So you have to identify like what those user personas are and like kind of tackle it like from all those different angles.
Yeah, talking about user personas, that's a very good point you brought up. I think when you're designing, what they encourage you to do is to pick the most extreme on both ends, like someone who is pro versus someone who is completely a novice, or sometimes it changes like a toddler versus an old person. So they say usually get the two extreme because the solution would then fall into the majority when we are done with it. And also the other point you brought up about co-creation is a key factor lately, I think, being pursued by many companies, is to get one of the difficult customers to actually work with building a solution. For example, if you're building an AI solution, you can pick a company that is the most paranoid of using AI and say, hey, why don't you build this solution with us and be part of this journey? And we've done that in the past.
Very similar points, to be honest, Sean. I was going to say to, I think thanks, Yuresh, for articulating that whole process. I think it's a combination of principles and then having that constant feedback loop. Right? What I was going to bring up is another example of user personas is sometimes you have to design. So good design is intuitive design. Gone are the days where you need like, user manuals and all that stuff, right? No one has time for that, right? So it has to be very intuitive. You need to design for the 80%, for the 80% of the population who's going to use your basic features. I think a good example is Google Maps. 80% of the people just use it to, get directions to go somewhere. But you also have tucked away in intuitive way to add like pins. Like some people I've seen, they add pins of all restaurants they want to visit or places they want to visit. And when they're in that area, they just open the map and it's like full of all these things that they've saved when they go on vacation, and they know exactly where they want to go because of proximity. But that's available in Google Maps, but it's tucked away nicely and it's not in your face for the everyday user. I think that's good design, right?
Love it, love it. Yeah. That's another principle too in the visibility part. Like they say, anticipate the advanced users, but tuck away
Mm.
the controls so it doesn't bother. Because if everything is like right on the face, you'll be confused. That's a great example.
So let's talk about some of these tools. So Figma, you mentioned that's like the new hot kid on the block right now, right?
Yeah, Figma has like a lot of different capabilities, right? Like it's not just the diagramming aspect. It has like a prototyping capability too. So you can actually design something like it almost looks like an actual thing,
Mm.
right? Like a clickable experience. Um, or a lot of people use Miro, a lot of companies use Miro, and there are like different levels of like a design, right? Like so you have like these low fidelity, high fidelity type of design. So you start with like something more low, more like wireframes, and then you kind of go into the actual user experience where like you even bring in like color themes and things like that, so that like you get a feel of like what that actual experience might look like, right? And also like from different aspects, like desktop versus mobile, like more like a tablet view, how you want to lay things out, right? Like because it's very different, like the moment like we get to see it like sometimes when we use, but when you actually design something, what you see on the desktop versus like on the mobile, like it's a different way of thinking, right? Like even like to a placement of like an image or like a button click or something, that if there's like an action button, like you might want to bring it to the top versus like laying it out on the bottom, like so that on the mobile, like you don't have to scroll like a lot of things like that.
I think the big advantage of tools like Figma, for example, and Miro that you mentioned is that it's taken away that barrier to prototype. Because
Mhm.
back in the day, maybe a product owner comes up with an idea, you have to work with design, and then you have to engage some engineering folks to build a lightweight prototype to actually test. So the time from the ideation to actually testing is months sometimes. And now with Figma and even with AI, even I think the product owner is able to come up with the prototype very quickly and be able to test quickly and say, hey, this is the design we're going to move forward with. So
And then
no excuses.
from there, like to convert it, there's actually it's seamless too. Right? Like
Seamless.
not like you're looking at something and redoing it in a different app. Like so you can actually have like a working prototype on Figma and use something like builder.io to actually convert it to like a working product now.
Yes, exactly.
Just like as an example. So there's seamless end-to-end capability.
So in that way, I think we can safely say there's no excuse now for bad design.
Exactly.
All the tools are there. If you're not using it, you're falling behind.
Yeah. Just to contrast the Miro and Figma, because we use both, I've used both. I think Figma is far advanced when it comes to prototyping, where you can actually build animation to prototype stuff. And you can also, to Yuresh's point, you can actually convert it to working assets that a designer can import into application and build it. But now with AI, it's even simpler. But I like Miro, especially for the design thinking work, like human-centric and user-centric design, because it's truly meant for sticky note ideas, and you can actually group some. It has AI built in. I think probably Figma has it too. Is that you can select a huge amount of sticky notes and say, okay, now categorize or synthesize ideas together. It nicely groups them into different synthesized categories. I find it very useful.
I think that itself goes to like some of the other things we were talking about. Like when those tools were designed, they originated for like a specific reason, right? Like so when Hero was kind of introduced to take away like the physical war room concept and make it like a more like a digital board, and now they have added like a bunch of other things. But Figma, when they designed, like it was mostly like a UX tool, right? Like or design like your UX versus kind of like a what do you call, like a doing like how to handle like an ideation session. So the journey where you would kind of start using those tools were different back in the day. But like with all these advanced capabilities, like now everyone is like adapting and introducing all these features.
I think the key there, though, is for someone starting out a new product, coming out a new product, start solving the original first problem first. I mean, is there a better way to say that? I mean, pick one problem, solve that well. Then, as your users start using the product, you might realize that they're actually using it for other use cases too. So learn from that, have metrics and whatnot. And then you can prioritize and say, okay, maybe this is the next capability we can add. Very often, sometimes people try to add like 10 capabilities in one
Yes.
go, and it becomes a soup, right? And it's confusing for the users.
That's a great point. I think for the audience, I also wanted to add that don't wait for a brand new idea that's going to change the world. Take a look at the existing processes and look at pain points, because there's always going to be some pain points in the process, and that's how Uber came to be. And there is a technique called Scamper. Maybe you can look it up. Scamper stands for substitute, combine, adapt, modify, put to another use, eliminate, and reverse. So there are different techniques. Like once you lay out the entire process, that's the key. You need to lay out the entire journey of a user, and then start to look at, can we resequence or can we eliminate certain process, and then you got a new process.
A more streamlined process.
Yeah.
Coming back to like keeping things simple, I'm going to put on my Asanka hat and come up with an analogy. Personally, for me, I love going to restaurants where the menu is like simple. It's like just a few items to pick from: appetizers, entrees, desserts, boom, right? It's easy. I can make up my mind very quickly. I get so confused when there are pages and pages to go through. I have no idea what to order, right? So I'm going to go with that.
Don't go to Cheesecake Factory.
Yeah, I know. I was going to say that. I didn't want to say it.
Put so many. It's like a booklet.
Yeah.
It's fun.
I think going back to like some of the principles. So there are like proven ways to do things, right? Like so obviously like adapting them, and sometimes like one flavor wouldn't like fit every situation. You kind of need to kind of understand and pick like your tools and like the processes like well. I think we were talking about like some of these early on, right? Like so I was mentioning about like the personas, right? So one of the things that you do with like the personas is called like the journey maps, right? It is like a kind of like a flow that you draw out. This persona kind of goes through like these stages. Another way to look at things is when we were talking about like these features, more and more I'm seeing this, like a lot of companies don't follow this actually. Like there's this concept of coming up with like a business capability map, right? Like you have like these multi-leveled like a capability map. You look at it from I mean, like I can speak to this like from various different industry. Like, so if you take like more like a retail or like a e-commerce type of like an industry, right? Like, so you have like your marketing, you have like your sales side, you have like your leads, then you have like your commerce aspects, right? Like, so how like the it goes from like marketing to sales to leads to converting it to like orders, and then order management side, then it goes all the way to like the like how it goes to like the revenue side, right? Like, so this is called like a lead to cash flow, right? Or there are like different flavors of that. So how do you kind of define that map in like different levels? So there are like different techniques to that companies follow like to do this. So there's this concept called like, so each capability should not overlap with each other, so they have like clear boundaries. There's a concept that's called like, the acronym is actually MICE. I think it stands for like mutually exclusive, collectively exhaustive. So you actually define these capabilities, and like once you define like the high level capability, which is like a level one, then you go into like a sub capability, and like there's a sub capability within that. So once you have that in place, then you can understand, okay, how do I enable this sub capability, right? Then you map that against like that persona or like the journey map, and figure out, okay, like this capability touches across like these touch points. Here's like now like the how the user experience should, right? So you go to like that level, so that like you are really enabling something that matches to your business case.
It's a very good point.
So these are like well proven techniques that I have personally experienced, like have worked like really well, but you have to spend some time like to get that right, because I worked with these types of sessions in the past. Doing a business capability map is not easy. It could take up to about 3 months, but if you do it well, it'll last for like a really long time, until like you kind of reorg or something like that whole. So you have to do some investment upfront, or like in phases, like to figure out like what the priorities are.
Absolutely. I think the key there is you have to be intentional in everything you do.
Mm.
You can't just be like, oh, let's add a button here, or this is how we're gonna, squeeze this feature in. It has to be quite thoughtful, right? So yeah, spot on. Thank you for sharing that, Yuri. That's pretty cool. Shall we end with modern solution pitfalls and how to avoid them?
Well, it's quite simple. I can say a huge trend right now. It's like when we are in doubt as to what the user would expect, we turn to AI these days. I don't know if that's a good choice. I mean, AI can help augment some of those to make sure that we covered some parts, but I think there is still merit in interviewing users, observing users. I think observation is very powerful. I think Yuresh, probably back in the day when we were working at a financial institution, they actually had an observation room where they invite the user to come in and they basically zoom in and find out what keys they are pressing and how they're following. I think there's huge benefit in doing that because back in the day we say it's a user error, right? Well, today that's a design flaw, right? If a user makes an error, it's a design flaw, and that's why the principles are there. But I feel like there is a trend. AI will solve the problem if you give a prompt to uh, the end user, then they would basically explain what they need in AI, and then we should enable from our services to provide that. But I have a feeling that the users don't want to do that. They want that made available easily. What do you guys think?
I think at the end of the day, we are designing things for humans. And even if AI comes up with a solution, we have to, like Yuresh mentioned in the beginning, we have to have that feedback loop with the human to test whether it actually is working or not. And if not, iterate on it, right? We can't just because AI came up with a solution doesn't mean that that is right.
But what about in the future? Are we going to still design for human? Because there is a principle that every capability that we are building, we need to have an MCP server so that in the future it can talk to other AI.
Yeah.
That is true.
So with regards to the user interfaces, right? I think we
Mm,
talked about a different flavor of this at the beginning
Hmm.
around the remote control, the phone, kind of having more like a digital capability, right? So, but the interface itself, we are so used to creating an app or a website or something, right? So with like the rise of AI, if you are having some kind of an agentic approach, like to achieve like a task, you actually don't need an interface,
Hmm.
right? Things run on the background, so to speak.
exactly.
I watched this interview that was, I can't remember like who was hosting it, but Eric Schmidt, like the one of the former Google CEOs, right? So he was talking about this around similar to how we kind of leverage like an interface to adapt, right? Within this agentic flows, you can actually have wherever like human in the loop kind of comes into picture in an agentic flow, you would dynamically generate like an interface just for that need. So
Hmm.
you're not even pre-designing it in a way that
Mm,
like user input would be expected, but it would be like very dynamic.
Hmm.
So think of like a very traditional web form, right? So when you design like a web form, like you are capturing it in a way that this is what like the users are going to enter all the time. Like they're going to enter their name, they're going to enter their email, they're going to enter like a subject, they're going to enter like a description or something like that. Like I kind of made up like an example, right? But in the future, like if something is needed, AI would like know what to basically present to the user so that like that human in the loop step is covered in a very dynamic way.
Hmm.
That part has to be designed in a way that it goes back to like some of those principles. Like would the user be able to easily understand like what they need to do here?
Hmm.
So some of those principles would still apply,
Hmm.
but like it wouldn't necessarily be like a more traditional thing, like where have already designed something, it's hosted somewhere, or like it's on like some app store that you have to download, right? Is presented to you. It's like a the way I look at it is like it's a different level of personalization.
Hmm.
It's an
Very
awesome idea.
specific and
Yeah,
intuitive. I
yeah.
love it. And maybe
I
we end on that. You know.
I wanted to say a fun part though. If you remember how we set up our fantasy football leagues, right? Imagine the flow was okay. What type of league? If you say this league, it's going to create a form that's just specific to your need
Hmm.
instead of having so many optional fields to fill
Yeah.
in. So yeah, I love that idea. Yeah. Suresh.
Really like it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Cool. Thanks, guys. This was a really fun conversation. I loved how we looked at the glimpse into the future as well. So I think exciting things are in store. But yeah, hope you guys enjoyed the conversation too. See you in the next episode. See ya.
Bye.